What's going on, world? Coming at you guys again. We got another quick video. Prejudice and racism in the criminal justice system. Let's talk about it. So, right now, trending, there's a case of about 4 or 5 individuals whom have been convicted allegedly of the murder of one Julio Fulio, rapper, entertainer, artist. Now, the thing that sticks out to me the most is one of the individuals was actually, to my understanding, 18 when he allegedly participated in the unaliving of this individual named Julio Fulio. That's his artist name. I don't know what his real name is. Now, the thing I want to talk to you about today is how the criminal justice system is ingrained and supported by biased, racist, and supremacist perspectives and applications. And the reason why I say this, and I'll continue to say this, is we are in modern times, 2026, to where we know specifically, definitively, that the brain, the prefrontal cortex, is one of the latest and last parts of the brain to fully develop, to consider you to be a fully competent and fully functioning individual. The prefrontal cortex is directly responsible for how you react in a situation, how do you plan in a situation, how you think long term about the pros and the cons and the actions and consequences of your actions within a situation. All of the factors in which we attribute to wisdom and maturity are directly responsible for the prefrontal cortex. Now, the prefrontal cortex does not start developing until 3 years of age. From the age of 3 to the age of 18, the prefrontal cortex probably develops around 3 to 4% per year. That means by the age of 18, it's most likely that your prefrontal cortex isn't even 50% developed yet. Take that into consideration. We're talking about not even 50% developed at 18. At 18, you don't have a lot of parameters. You can't go buy alcohol. It's very difficult for you to try to go buy a house. Any methods in order to facilitate your ability to become an adult, to say that you are a man, are significantly limited by the time that you're 18, because you haven't proven nor have you accomplished really anything to put yourself in a position to where you are deemed reliable and deemed as competent by any responsible system in America. Yet the criminal justice system has the audacity to charge and hold someone accountable for their actions as an adult. Now, this is one part of the system in which it could be argued as biased from a cultural perspective. Here's a scientific purpose. We have come to know that from a scientific perspective, again, psychology and psychological, the prefrontal cortex, we just talked about that. Here's a secondary scientific fact that cannot be argued. A person of color has something called pigment, or they have a higher amount or concentration of pigment, which allows them the availability to live in the environment, to absorb as much skin and sun exposure as possible, for the physiological function for consuming vitamin D from the sun, which helps to recharge their cells through their electrons in their body, which gives them the energy for their cellular capacity to function appropriately. Now, there is something specifically that changes and deviates between a person of color and a person that does not have color, or we'll just say a white person in comparison to a black person. These things are called telomeres. Telomeres and sentience. When you become a certain age, your telomeres start to fade through cellular division, and you end up with the possibility of developing a process of end stage. You start to die. That's kind of how it works. And the faster it divides, the more sentience you have, then the sooner you're going to pass away. Now, when you look at the comparison between white people and you look at the comparison between black people, black people are born with significantly longer telomeres than white people, which means that it takes a significantly longer amount of time for a person of color to fully develop in comparison to the white person. So when you talk about actions and accountability that are attributable to here into the criminal justice system, we have to understand and recognize that the Constitution says that we are all created equally. That is not based upon the genealogical and genetic factors in which make up our DNA. Again, on average, by the time you're 18 years old, the prefrontal cortex is maybe 50% developed. That's on average. And those statistics are for white people, Caucasian people, whose telomeres are significantly shorter than black people's, which means that they move forward, they develop, and they become complete at a lot earlier age than a black person. Which means that a black person or a person of color's telomeres, their prefrontal cortex will not be developing as soon, as fast, which means they require more time for more development. So when you're talking about an individual like this individual who was 18 years old, who allegedly is responsible for the actions of unaliving an individual named Julio Fulio, the likelihood that this individual was mature and wise enough to understand the consequences, the long-term consequences of his actions, really doesn't even exist. Because we've already established from a white person's or a Caucasian person's or a non-melanated, non-colored individual, by the age of 18, they themselves aren't even developed by 50%. So a person of color whose telomeres are longer, which means they live longer, which means they have the capacity to grow longer, which means it's going to take more time for them to fully develop, means that at age 18, their prefrontal cortex isn't even as developed as the system that recognizes a white person or a person that is not of color. Now, these are genetic factors that are indisputable. These are facts. These are laws. Another consideration is the environment in which an individual grows up in. The more stress, the more trauma, whether it's physical, whether it's emotional, whether it's psychological, all factors of trauma inhibit the growth or stunt the growth of the prefrontal cortex, which makes your choices that much less wise, that much less mature. So as we continuously move down this rabbit hole of a biased criminal justice system, we have to take all of these factors into consideration. We are holding individuals accountable for their actions with the expectations that they were not going to make a mistake and that they are supposed to be perfect. But we are utilizing a system in which is biased, which is discriminatory, and which is not perfect, while expecting a human being to be perfect, when we all know for a fact that Adam and Eve were brother and sister. They were made from the same DNA, and the offspring, through incestuous, was that of an individual who was mentally challenged. We are all products of mentally challenged individuals. This is the fact. This is the reality, no matter how you want to cut it or slice it or how you want to argue it. If Eve was made from Adam's rib, that means Eve was made through the same DNA as Adam, which means they were kin. So the fruit of the forbidden tree was the womb. That's why Adam and Eve covered themselves, because when you break a hymen, there's blood. And you've never hurt yourselves in the Garden of Eden, because nothing could be hurt in the Garden of Eden. The first time you saw blood, you panicked. You didn't know what to do. This is the truth of the matter. We live in a society that is predatory, that is prejudiced, that is racist, that is biased, and that is prejudicial. It's time to start addressing the factors, and it's time to come back into the Bible and to practice the teachings of God. No one here on this planet is without sin. No one here on this planet is perfect. We have to stop acting like it. And we have to stop utilizing these measures that have been put in place that are completely prejudicial and racist and just overwhelmingly toxic against people of color. It is completely immoral, and it is a hypocrisy to try to apply an imperfect system to expect perfection from an imperfect being. We have to make a change. These are indisputable facts, and I dare anyone to challenge me on these facts from a scientific perspective, and I guarantee you cannot, without a doubt. So as we move forward, we have to understand that empathy and sympathy are requirements in order to facilitate and foster a more humane and human experience here on this planet. This is one of the reasons why Charlie Kirk is no longer with us. Charlie Kirk was very outspoken, but for some of the things that he used to talk about, the mannerisms in which he displayed, and the actions in which he took, was so profoundly supported with hubris, with a lack of humility and sensitivity and sympathy, that unfortunately his beliefs, his personification, unfortunately became a direct threat to another individual or group of individuals, or was targeted against specific individuals when he himself was not perfect. So for an individual to point the finger and to lay blame at actions and situations while trying to tout themselves in a manner in which they were always right, well, that's the definition of a narcissist. If you look at my page specifically states, I am not perfect. I am not without fault, mistake, or sin. And nobody on this planet is. So it's time that we stop idolizing judges and lawyers and all of these different individuals who find themselves in positions of power that have been elected by the people. They are not. We are all the same. We all have different strengths and weaknesses. We all have different capacities. It is time to turn the other cheek. It is time to recognize that two wrongs don't make a right. It is time to recognize that an eye for an eye leaves the world blind. And it is time to recognize that we are all imperfect. And through these measures, we need to transition our criminal justice system from specifically being designed for accountability and incarceration, for rehabilitation and the expectation of contribution back into the society.